Hello, everybody. I'm Samantha Steiner, and this is week 5 of our multilingual nonfiction writing live stream. Um, really happy to be here, and also really happy to announce that all of the Writing Institute's live streams have been so successful that we've been offered the chance to extend our class indefinitely. And so I believe that the class will go forward for at least a few more weeks. If anyone is interested in helping guide the course, if anyone has questions, comments, or requests about what they'd like to see covered, I really welcome that. But it's good to be here and really fun to share this space with everybody. I also want to thank someone commented last week asking if I would share my writing for the prompt for last week. So a lot of this class will actually focus on one of the pieces that I wrote. Just in this past week in real time, I wanted to do the assignment with everybody else and talk about sort of how we can edit and compress and find what I call the story under the surface. And that's a term that I learned from Joanne Beard at Sarah Lawrence College. So I want to give her proper credit. So this is week 5. This is about editing in real time. So the objective is to tighten and compress our stories once we've written a first draft. And what we're going to do during this class is actually what everyone who wants to will do for homework this week, which is to take our 800-word stories and compress them to 400 words, then 200 words, then 100, and then 50, and finally, if you're up for it, to compress the entire story into a single sentence, a sentence of any length, but one sentence nonetheless. And so for this week, first we'll just read through some of what I wrote. This is a first draft. I want to share it as it is because I think we can all kind of learn together here. We'll read through it, and then together we'll compress it first to 400 and so on. And I think the really important thing to remember here is that phrase, kill your darlings. I feel like a lot of writers have trouble with this, getting rid of phrases or sentences or even characters that they really love, because those things are not energizing the story. But I personally find it really fun. It's kind of like spring cleaning, like just getting rid of the stuff that I had because of sentimental attachment, but was actually kind of weighing me down. I feel like once it's cut, I feel better and the story feels lighter and feels more energized. So let us go to the screen share as we do and see what I wrote for week 5 or week 4, the assignment. Here we go. So I formatted this as if it were something I were submitting to a lit journal. I don't have a title for it yet because we're still searching for the story under the surface. And I think that will guide how we title it. But just a reminder of the prompt. In no more than 800 words, write a true story in which you use exactly 3 different languages. Once you've written it, identify the story on the surface and the story under the surface. So what I wrote actually, let's take a peek if it's 800 words. I have a feeling that it's under. It's also not finished. It feels like the beginning of a much longer piece. And if anyone didn't get the chance to finish their writing, that's completely fine. Just work with it as it is. Or if you have the need or the desire to finish it, then go for it. But whatever you do, do it for yourself. Don't do it out of obligation. Okay, 735. So we're okay. We're close to 800, but it only said under. So let's read through this. You walk through a neon forest, your spherical head bobbing on your shoulders. You see an apple tree. You shake it. 3 apples fall to the ground. You pick up all 3 and put them in your pockets, where you already have 6 cherries, 2 peaches, and a coconut. You walk into the kitchen of your childhood home. You are 5 years old. Your babysitter is preparing lunch for you and your brother. Siéntate, mi amor, she tells you, and you take your seat at the table. Raso, she calls your brother Russell. Vení a comer. Your brother runs in from the other room and takes his seat next to you. Your babysitter sets down a bowl in front of each of you. Angel hair pasta mixed with peas, sliced hot dog, slick warm butter. You eat. In the neon forest, you meet a penguin named Aurora. She is as tall as you are, with a snowman-shaped body and flapping black feet. She speaks to you in high-pitched bursts, ba bee bee bo ba 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 bo, like someone recorded her actual voice and is playing it at quadruple speed. A thought bubble blooms over Aurora's head. Inside the bubble is an apple. You give her one of your apples. She thanks you with a sack of money and a bundle of raw cotton. At the bottom of your spaghetti bowl, there is a puddle of melted butter. You want that butter. Your babysitter and your brother are both on the couch now, watching TV. You have always been a slow eater. Sometimes being a slow eater has its advantages. You lift the bowl to your face and flood your tongue with butter. In the neon forest, you browse a furniture catalog. You use the money and the cotton from Aurora to buy a new bed. You wait 10 minutes for the bed to arrive. When it does, you go to your camper. Your camper has a pink exterior and 2 floors. You put the bed on the 2nd floor, centered under the window, with a lamp on one side and a wooden chest on the other. You arrange 2 white teddy bears on top of the chest. Across from the bed, you lay out a dining table with a plate of spaghetti, a basket of vegetables, smoked meats. You don't have enough matching chairs to make up a dining set, so you pick out chairs in similar shades of brown to match the table. You spend 3 hours arranging furniture. You eat spaghetti with peas and sliced hot dogs and butter until you are old enough to stay home alone. Then your babysitter comes only once a week to bathe you and tidy up around the house. Ciao, mi reina, she tells you when it's time for her to go, though you cling to her leg. Hasta la próxima. You venture out to the neon forest again. This time, you meet a kangaroo named Carrie. She wears a red dress with white polka dots and a pouch for her Joey, who says nothing but smiles when she does. Carrie's voice is higher than Aurora's, less a ba bee bee bo ba ba bo, and more a bee bee ba bee 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 bo. A thought appears over Carrie's head. Inside it is a coconut. You give her a coconut. She thanks you with a sack of money and a few bars of raw steel. You use the steel to order a new refrigerator. Your family moves to a new apartment where your babysitter still puts Telemundo on as loud as it will go and wipes every surface with Mr. Clean. Your family fractures from divorce. No more Telemundo and no more Mr. Clean. You move to another apartment, then to a dorm room, then to another dorm, another apartment, another. A pandemic keeps you from visiting any of the places where you once lived. The new refrigerator will only fit on the 2nd floor if you get rid of the chest with the 2 bears. But now there's a fridge and the table is all set up. It finally makes sense for you to put your oven here. You get rid of the bed to make room for the oven. And that's sort of what we've got going so far. So I'm gonna let everyone sort of in on my process and what I'm aiming to do here, because I think that will make it easier for us to edit. So one thing that I feel is clear here is that this story is a braided narrative, that it alternates between 2 different times and locations. And the first one feels pretty concrete, that it's the narrator when she's 5 years old. And this is nonfiction, so though the narrator is me, to keep things in the realm of art and not the personal, we'll refer to me as the narrator. Or rather, I am the author and the narrator is a character I'm having speak for me. So here we have, right here, you are 5 years old, planted pretty early in this narrative line. It's the narrator's childhood, it's the kitchen of her childhood home. And then the other one is totally trippy. It's really surreal. that there's this neon forest, and pockets that can accommodate much more than any pockets we know of. And there's a penguin in the forest, right? So right away we understand that one of these threads is really consistent with reality, and the other feels like a fantasy land. We've also got our two languages, right? A language that belongs to each of these worlds. There's Spanish in the world of realism, and there's these robot-like sounds in the world of the surreal, and English surrounding everything, right? English is really the main conveyor of the story. So we've got the true story, we've got 3 different languages, and the story on the surface is braided, right? So in one storyline, let's actually just take the time and write this out. Story on the surface. What happens? The narrator for story A and story B. Story A, let's just do it in bullet points. I feel like that's the least intimidating. No pressure to create full coherent sentences. So story A, in this zany wonderland, narrator picks up an apple. Narrator gives the apple to a penguin, as one does. Narrator uses penguin's reward to buy a bed. And here's the most important part for letting you in on what's going on here. This first plot line I plan to reveal at the end of this story is happening within the game Animal Crossing, specifically Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, which is an app that I have on my phone. And so what I wanted to reveal is within these pandemic times, the phone is or my phone, the narrator's phone, is the holder of these two worlds, the world of Animal Crossing with this sort of whimsical made up language, and the world of WhatsApp and other messaging services where the narrator is still able to reach out to her babysitter. And the story A in this first world, in this first language, is associated with something that's really happy and escapist. And story B is so much more serious because of the crisis and concern for everyone's health. So with that said, as an aside, but a rather important aside, we can take a look. Actually, these logos that I use to separate paragraphs, I thought I would drop that in as a hint for anyone who is well versed in the realm of Animal Crossing. This is actually the leaf logo that is associated with the game. So I hope I don't come into any copyright trouble for that, but since this is a free online class, I don't think that that will be an issue. Okay, story A, narrator picks up an apple, gives the apple to a penguin, uses the penguin's reward to buy a bed. Narrator spends 3 hours arranging a room. That feels important, right? That on the page feels like something that means more than what we know it means right now. Then what? Narrator gives coconut to a kangaroo. Narrator uses kangaroo reward. So there's a lot of repetition to buy a fridge. And the reason for that is I wanted to make sure the story had its own logic. And repetition is a really good way of sort of constructing an internal logic. Because this is such a zany little wonderland, we need something that the reader can sort of grab onto in order to feel that that they're not missing anything, that the story is not like failing to communicate, that this is supposed to be mysterious. So, and then narrator gets rid of the bed to make room for fridge, not directly, but indirectly. So there seems to be a lot of emphasis on furniture and arranging furniture in a home. Okay, story B. Story B might feel actually a little less repetitious and a little more random. So what happens? Um, Narrator eats lunch made by babysitter. And this also establishes the relationship between the narrator and the babysitter, right? Because we have the babysitter right from the beginning call her mi amor. So she's got authority. She orders her siéntate, sit down, but also addresses her with a term of endearment. So then narrator sneaks butter from the bottom of the bowl, which is either disgusting or delicious, depending on how you feel about butter. What happens next? Let's look right at the story. We've got the butter, and then we've got reduced visits, right? The babysitter comes less frequently. So it helps if the sentence can start with narrator, but that's not always easy if the story is about the narrator. So babysitter visits less frequently, narrator clings to her. I'll also note, I chose to write the story in the second person. That's really because it's ultimately, or in some way, about a video game. And so I wanted to create that immersive experience of being in a video game. So you walk through a neon forest is as close to virtual reality as we can get in writing, or to simulating that feeling that it is virtual reality, which is really tricky because actual virtual reality doesn't want to feel like virtual reality. It wants to feel like reality. So the you makes this whole story a little more self-conscious in a way that I wanted. Okay, what have we got? Then babysitter stops visiting. And narrator moves homes multiple times. And that's the story on the surface. I feel like that covers it. Now, story under the surface. What is connecting these two plot lines? Well, if we were to just throw out some words to think about this, we could say idea of home. Another thing that I noticed, even as I was writing and as I was reading over this, there's a lot of sort of richness, golden sparkly things. So I'm going to say richness and explain. There's the melted butter, which feels golden and warm and is sort of made to seem luxurious. There's the babysitter calling the narrator mi reina, which literally means my queen, and could become, if read a certain way, feel a little colonialist, right? Where we have what presumably is a Latin American woman addressing a young, and we know, Caucasian girl as my queen. So I think that we would have to be really careful in the final writing of this story to make it clear what the relationship was here, and that this was a term of endearment and not a term of literal ruling. One thing we have to balance that out is that the babysitter's first line is siéntate, sit down. So she is in the position of authority, even if she's sort of generous in how she is titling her charge. And then we have these sacks of money in the game. Those feel important. And so I feel that a lot of editing and writing is noticing all of these little coincidences, right? What's bubbling up from the subconscious, or what were the details that I chose to mention in the writing that I didn't have to mention? because I believe that that's my brain and my memory nudging me that these things are more important than I consciously know they are. So what have we got? And then these commodities, such as cotton, fruit. Well, maybe we'll put fruit first. Cotton, steel, furniture, and all of this trade. It's a very hyper-capitalistic piece of writing because perhaps it's a hyper-capitalistic game. Capitalistic, well, we don't need capitalistic. What am I even doing? Anyway, so story under the surface. How can we describe the story under the surface? Well, one way to think about it is the arc of insight. We talked a little about this last class. The arc of insight. What do we know at the end of the story that we didn't know at the beginning? What do we learn? We're gonna give ourselves a little bit more room here. Here we go. Well, it seems like the narrator is learning something about loss, right? Because this, to me, feels very much about loss of home. But it also seems like it's about reconstruction of a home. So let's just take a break from arc of insight for a moment, because I think that the compressing will help us figure out what it is. So now, I recommend to everybody, if you are tinkering with a draft, it's really hard to predict ahead of time what will be useful later and what won't. So we're gonna copy and paste this whole dude into a new document. And you know what, I'm gonna keep it in the same document. I think that is easier. Thank you all for your patience with my tinkering. Okay, insert page break. We are going to shorten this dude to 400 words. So the first question is, what can go? What is slowing us down? Sometimes it's really heartbreaking to get rid of these things, but I think that it's okay. I think we'll survive the heartbreak and come out stronger for it. How's that? There's a lot of chatter about furniture. We might be able to get rid of a lot of this. How about that? Dead weight, gone. Okay. You wait 10 minutes, that adds to the sense of like surrealism, but we have that already. We don't need to explain the furniture catalog. Okay, is there anything we can shave from this paragraph? I think that's okay. Well, let's try a different one. Let's find a long section here. What if we got rid of this whole thing? Sets down a bowl in front of you. My feeling with memoir is it's okay to exclude characters from a scene who were actually there. They don't really have much to do with the scene. I don't believe in lying, but I do believe in selectivity of vision. I think selectivity of vision is something that we as artists have license to use. And if it makes the story more entertaining and it makes it move more swiftly and it actually helps focus the story, I have no ethical problem with that. I think sometimes too many details can become really distracting. Okay, so here we've got our neon forest. And I will say I'm still thinking about title. Title, I think, is my little chance as a writer to point at what I want the reader to remember, right? To say like, pay attention for this thing. And the title sort of does that right at the very beginning and then again at the end if the reader looks back. It's like, oh, what was that piece called? So then why did they title it that way? It's my final word to the story. I also believe that the title is a promise, and that if the title creates expectations that don't really get met, and the question of why they weren't met is never answered, they can get pretty frustrating. So make sure that the title isn't false advertising. Is my feeling about this stuff. So we're at 567. We got to shed a lot of extra stuff here. Okay. What if we get rid of this? Your babysitter tells you. So that the reader might be assuming that this and the previous scene are happening in the same day. I think that that's okay here. I really, I feel like we're maybe floating in time, and the reader might intuit that, and they might not. But the story is kind of the same. So, the melted butter. What if we get rid of the other characters in the scene? They added a little suspense, but again, we want to really trim this down. We don't need to establish you want that butter, because the butter is the narrators already. Okay. What else have we got here? Neon forest. What about in the neon forest? I feel that doing editing like this requires a certain skill, and I think you develop it over practice. But once you do it, you can sort of do it on autopilot, like you develop an eye for what can go. These little sequences are cute, but I noticed even reading them out loud that they took me a while to stumble through, that they were sort of tripping on the tongue. So what if we got rid of 3 of them? So that here we've got Ba Bi Bi Bo and Bi Bi Ba Bi. I think it's even easier to hear the difference between those two. Okay, so now we need to find the first auroras. Ba Bi Bi. Okay, Bo. As one does, right? As one does. But we want to make sure that we're working on the right draft. So here it is. Oh, here we go. Okay. Recording the voice actual speed, I feel like that's a metaphor that I've heard before, or simile because of the like that I've heard before. It doesn't feel exciting. I'd actually rather have the reader's imagination participate a little bit more. Okay. We don't necessarily need this. As long as we know that Aurora is getting the apple, we don't need to see the prompting. That's one of those cuts. The same way in movies, you don't see the person dial the phone, you just hear them on the phone. I feel like that's fine. Okay. You use the money and the cotton from Aurora to buy a new bed. When it does, okay. So this is based on stuff we cut before. You put the bed on the 2nd floor of your camper. And I think you can see that I'm not really doing this in any particular order. I'm moving more or less chronologically, beginning to ending through the piece. But I feel like wherever I can cut, I cut. I don't need to do it in a particular way, because that's just making my job more difficult. My job is to trim this, and however it happens, it happens. Okay. What if we skip that first move? So that's not doing that much. What if we get rid of the Telemundo and Mr. Queen, and say no more spaghetti with peas and hot dogs. This is adding to our word count, but this feels like an important element to repeat. Sliced hot dogs. That, again, important detail worth the word count for now. And butter. So what is butter here? Why is butter so important? Is it the sweetness of life? Is it the warmth? Is it something of childhood? Or maybe it's the greed of licking the butter from the bowl. Feels like something about childhood and innocence. Pandemic. It's a very poignant topic, but it also might warrant a little more space than what we have here. So what if we tried to unload it to get rid of some of the expectations? This feels a little more open-ended and maybe a little more universal. I wonder a little bit if writing this story and sort of stamping it with the time of the pandemic might date it and limit its usefulness. Okay, the new refrigerator. What if something like that? It might need a little more context, but that can be worked out later. I'm okay with sort of doing a sketch, right? The same way that an artist is not going to agonize over every detail of a first draft or of a sketch. I don't really worry about making sure every single word is just so. Again, it's like a sculpture. I believe I've said this in previous classes that like I don't really fuss over the details until I'm sure of the big picture. So let's see what's going on word count wise and if we are there. 370, we are under 400, my friends. All right, well, we know what comes next. We're gonna copy paste this whole thing, or copy paste our 370 version and get it down to 200. And if we really wanted to be finicky and sort of push ourselves, we could try to bump it up again from 370 back to 400 by not copy pasting elements that were already in this, but rather writing something new, or again, putting context around this last snippet. I'm going to take a break from screen sharing just so you all can see my face. I think that it's nice to make sure that this class actually involves some face-to-face interaction, even if it's digitally. So, how are we feeling? If anybody wants to post in the chat box, either now or after class, I'm always sure to read those comments. They mean a lot to me. You can also email me or find me on social media, and I will be sure to attend to those messages and respond if you'd like. But if we're feeling good, we'll plow right on ahead. I'm gonna open a new document just because this one is getting a little crowded with all of our writing. And so, of course, we are going to, we are going to make sure to keep that copy of this 370 word version and then trim down the copy pasted version, right, of the 370 and shave that down to 200. So back to lay screen share. Back to the spherical head bobbing on the shoulders. Okay. So what can we pick out? We can probably get rid of the 6 cherries, 2 peaches, even the coconut. and just leave that mystery hanging there. We might decide later that the reader needs a little help to understand that 3 apples can't fit in the pocket, but we'll see. So this is kind of fun. Fall to the ground. Let's make it a little more active and say hit, right? One verb, fewer prepositions. You don't need to pick up. We just put them in the pockets. You walk into the kitchen of your childhood home. You are 5 years old. Well, maybe we don't need that home. That's your lunch in front of you. So now that we're deleting the element of home, it becomes less about home and more about the person and perhaps about the language. Sets your lunch in front of you. Angel hair pasta. Well, we don't need angel hair right now. Pasta with peas. Okay. And we can assume that this person is going to eat. Okay. In the neon forest, we need this as a cue, especially the first time when we're going back and forth between these scenes. You meet a penguin. We don't need her name, do we? I think it's okay. I think snowman-shaped body reads a little awkward, so we're going to say she has a body shaped like a snowman. And because we don't want to think that she has a body shaped like flapping black feet, we're going to say flapping black feet and a body shaped like a snowman. Okay, you give her one of your apples. What if you give her an apple? Just shaving word count down wherever we can. So the sack of money isn't doing much. What if you give her an apple in exchange for a bundle of raw cotton? So that is all happening faster, right, in the same sentence, as opposed to spread across several sentences. So, at the bottom of your spaghetti bowl, there is a puddle of melted butter. You lift the bowl to your face and flood your tongue with it, not butter, twice in a row. Sounds a little clunky. You use the cotton. There we go. See, all of it dropping away. We don't need it. Dead weight. You use the cotton to buy a new bed. So the more efficient way to say this is you buy a new bed with the cotton, but I want to keep that keyword of cotton to remind us of where it's from, and lead with that so that the reader is able to put together what's happening here. You put the bed on the second floor of your camper. Okay, so you put the bed in your camper, centered under the window, with a lamp on one side and a wooden chest on the other. So there's a lot of short words that aren't doing much, right? On the one side, between a lamp and a wooden chest. Can say the exact same thing with much fewer words. Between a lamp and a wooden chest. Okay. Again, this is really short. So now this feels comparatively long. Let's see where we are on word count right now. Tools and word count. 309. We got 100 to go and we can do it. I believe in us. In the neon forest, you meet a kangaroo named Carrie. Okay. So now we've seen all of this before with Aurora, so we can do this much faster. You meet Carrie the kangaroo. Sounds a little corny though. The Joey is really interesting because it's a nonverbal character, but I don't think we have room for it right now. So her voice, and now this is becoming much more about language, right? That's what's surviving this piece right now. All of the dialogue, we haven't cut any of it because it feels so important. So the thought bubble, we don't need. You trade Carrie, or you give Carrie a coconut in exchange for, and again, we've seen this. We don't need the sack of money for some raw steel or for some, I think raw steel helps give context. It's only one extra word. So let's see how we said you use the steel to order a new refrigerator feels a little clunky. Let's see what we did with the cotton. You use the cotton to buy a new bed. So let's keep consistent with the logic that we have here. You use the steel to buy a new refrigerator. That we understand that this is a deliberate repetition. Okay. So maybe we don't need the divorce because that sort of overshadows the real story, which I think is about the babysitter. That's becoming more clear. So now we've got a story under the surface developing. No more spaghetti with peas and sliced hot dogs and butter. Okay. So what if your babysitter stops coming or you outgrow your babysitter? Your mother tells you that you are too old for a babysitter. And that's true, but that was within the context of a divorce. But I, as author, feel that I am telling the truth. And that's really the metric here. No more spaghetti with peas and sliced hot dogs. So we've had this enough times that we might be able to get rid of these intermediary things. No more spaghetti and butter. You move to another apartment, then to a dorm. Well, maybe we don't need to move so far forward in time. Maybe that we can sort of rest in this moment because this feels like loss. And that, as I said, that was what the story feels like. It's about loss. So you get rid of the bed to make room for the oven. I feel that for that last sentence, we need to give a little context. Being your camper. But that's okay. We can sort of sort that out later. The story still needs an explanation of what's going on with this video game and that this is a video game. 253, 50 words have to go. Where shall we cut? Who's next? Who's next? Okay. What if we got rid of, oh, this is hard. This is really what we're here for, friends. You walk through a neon forest. Maybe we don't need the spherical head. In a neon forest, you shake an apple tree. It hurts, but it feels good. So I'm tempted to say you put the fallen apples in your pocket. I think that's a jump that the reader's mind could make. Let's do in pocket singular to make it even more surprising. And maybe put feels kind of blah, so drop has a little more action. Feels a little more dramatic. You're 5 years old, your babysitter sets lunch in front of you. In front of 3 words, let's replace it with 1, before you. pasta with peas, sliced hot dogs. Mm, let's introduce the butter later. You are 5. We don't need those years old. We got a smart reader here. So you see how every one of these passages is sort of becoming one sentence, or maximum 3. In the neon forest, you meet a penguin. She speaks to you in high-pitched bursts. We don't need this description. We need the language. And maybe a penguin speaks to you. There we go. And now what's happening with this fragmenting? I feel almost that we can start combining these passages and get rid of these section breaks, or else go back and forth only 1 or 2 times rather than so many times. But we can decide about that later. Let's take a look at how we're doing on word count. 218, 18 words to go. All right. You give her an apple in exchange for some raw cotton. Again, 1 word will do instead of 3. At the bottom of your spaghetti bowl, there is a puddle of melted butter. What if melted butter pools at the bottom of your bowl? You lift the bowl. Well, we don't want bowl twice in a row, 2 consecutive sentences. So maybe it's you lift the rim to your face and flood your tongue with it. But now it's not, it could mean the rim, could mean the bowl, could mean the butter. So flood your tongue with butter. And if we want to avoid the clunkiness of the 2 consecutive sentences, we might be able to come up with something even better, like sweet warmth or oil or slickness, something like that. We'll do sweet warmth for now. I know it's 1 more word than necessary, but it is kind of evocative. Okay, so maybe you buy a bed with the cotton. Or you trade the cotton for a new bed. You put the bed in your cabin, because in Animal Crossing there is, and I will tell you with my expert knowledge, both a camper and a cabin, and I worry that camper is a little confusing. We could even say home. In your upstairs bedroom. Right, so we're sort of taking the game and humanizing it, making the pixels feel a little bit more real here. Centered between a lamp and we could use a 1 word here instead of 2, maybe instead of a wooden chest, between a lamp and a dresser. And you arrange furniture for 3 hours. Or you rearrange, still same word count. Ciao, mi reina, your babysitter tells you when it's time for her to go. That's a little linguistically, we can shave stuff there. Though you cling to her leg. At the end of the day, if we have room for it, I have a feeling that we'll have to trim that later, but we'll let it be. 2:10, almost there, almost there. I fear that we are running short on time, so we can continue this next week if we want to. But in the few minutes that we actually have left for this class, I thought I don't want us to get booted unexpectedly. So let's take a quick look at the homework assignment and talk a little bit about what we're doing here. Let us navigate to it. Mm. So you are looking at my desktop, clunky as it can sometimes be. So here we've got our week 5. So this is the original prompt that we had from last week, to write a story no more than 800 words. If anyone is tuning in for the first time, what I'd really recommend is taking anything you've written on any topic. If it's about 800 words, great. If it's more than that, that's fine too. And just try to cut the word count in half, and then in half again, and in half again, until finally it's a single sentence. So um, we've seen that it's really just a matter of putting in the time. I think most people have this misconception that creating great writing is about having bursts of genius. But one of my favorite musicians, the pianist John McLaughlin, actually said that for him, writing music is like being a surfer and swimming out to sea every day and waiting on his surfboard. And that most days there is no wave. But on the days that the wave does come, those days wouldn't happen if he weren't swimming out there every single day. So resonates with me, and I hope it resonates with you, that you just keep showing up and putting in steady, consistent labor. That there are a lot of really maybe uneventful days, but they all add up to something, even if they don't feel like they do. I genuinely believe that. So, the single sentence of any length, let's see if we can do that here. If we've gotten to sort of the real center of the story, how would we summarize the story under the surface? Maybe it's a confession. Maybe it's maybe it's not a you. Maybe it's an I. That's what feels natural here. I play Animal Crossing. Here, we're gonna do this. Or maybe we'll say I play Dollhouse to make it a little more abstract. I played Dollhouse to recreate the childhood home I lost. That's really quickly spitballing it. But once we have that, if we've decided that that's the story under the surface, and it's one of many possible stories under the surface, then we can shave away every single detail that does not point to that thesis, so that this whole piece feels super aerodynamic and lightweight, and like it's moving, that it has energy in every sentence. So I found this class really fun, really exciting. I found that I was learning, and I hope that everyone else was learning too. So happy writing, and I look forward to tuning in again next week. Take care.